Hello, thank you for watching Taxpayer Alert. I'm Al Segala, I'll be your moderator, and I'm also president of the Calaveras County Taxpayer Association. We're most interested in helping to educate the public on important issues of the day. We attract amazing people on this program that are experts in their field, and every program seems to get better and better. It looks like this one's going to be the best yet. Our guest this time is Mark Trupper, who's the program director of AM 1450 KVML. Mark, welcome aboard.
With a build-up like that, I better not fail you, Al.
well, Mark, I'm so glad to meet you in person. I hear you on the air all the time, and I wonder, tell me a little bit about yourselves. How do you get into radio?
Well, when I was a young kid, my mom, I was in the third grade, and there was a disc jockey in Seattle, Washington. I was born and raised in Issaquah, Washington. And a disc jockey in Seattle at a country FM radio station invited my mom to take a tour of the radio station. He was working the 7 p.m. to midnight shift. So I think I know what was on his mind. He thought since he would have the radio station to himself, he would really impress my mom by inviting her down to the station and showing off. Mom took me along. I think I was the safety measure for my mom. So we walked into this radio station, KMPS, and I met this disc jockey. He was probably surprised that I was tagging along with my mom, but I watched him go on the air, and when he put his headphones on and took that microphone and he said, "Please be quiet in the studio," that was it for me. I knew this is the career that I want to go into, because as I was watching him talk into that microphone, I thought all of Seattle, Washington, Tacoma, Washington, Everett, everybody can hear this guy, and I'm watching him speak. That was the magical moment for me. From there, I started listening to every radio station in Seattle, and I'd note their formatics, news talk, with the eruption of Mount St Helens eventually, listening to the way various local news, national news would cover the same event, very different dynamics, and music formats and how kids would react, how boys would react to rock radio, how females younger girls would react to pop radio, and how older adults would react to adult contemporary music. I knew this was something that I had to get into. At that point, I was hooked. So I started the quest early. When I was in junior high and hooked on listening to news talk radio, I was very unlike the fellow students who never had any time for news talk radio. That's crazy. They were all listening to music. But I was noting the formats of every radio station and writing things down. And by the time I was in high school, in the 11th grade, I knocked on the doors of a radio station in Seattle called KUBE, Cube 93 FM. They hired me. My sole job was to answer the telephone lines, answer the request lines, because the program director and the disc jockey on the air, they were very busy. And when you're dealing with the entire Western Washington listening audience, that phone call, the phone lines are constantly ringing.
Right.
So I was answering the phone lines and then making telephone calls to Tower Records, Musicland, finding out what singles were selling, what albums were selling, because that way the radio station could react accordingly. I learned at a high school age that radio is a business. Up until then, I thought it's just fun. The fun formatics, the fun music, the disc jockeys on the air were talking about, we're going to be at this club this Friday night, come on down and dance, or come over to this restaurant. When you used to see the spotlights in the air and they'd circle, and if it was a car dealership that was opening up for the first time,
Right.
you knew that there was going to be a radio station or 2 or 3 at this brand new car dealership, and they're having fun, and they're giving out T-shirts, and they're giving out bumper stickers, they're giving out prizes.
Right.
And so I thought it was always fun until then I understood, once I was in high school, this is a business.
Yeah.
And there's salespeople involved, and it is a business based on the ratings, and they have to know exactly what the people of Seattle want in order to make this radio station successful. It just so happened I was at a very successful radio station, KUBE 93 FM, the exact same radio station. I was there at the exact same time that a guy named Glenn Beck was on the air, spinning records, playing music, and he eventually went into news talk radio, is now a very famous talk show host, and I went into news talk radio. So I don't know what it was about Cube 93's music, but we both leaned towards the talk radio side.
Did you have voice training, or were you just born with
No,
a good voice?
no. When I first went into radio, my first on-air radio job was in Spokane, Washington, at a Christian radio station, and I used to listen to those cassettes. The younger audience may have no idea what a cassette is.
Yeah.
But we used to record ourselves on 2 cassettes, and I would go home and listen to myself, and I would cringe. I had no idea that I had a major enunciation problem, and I do. But over time, I've learned to correct it by over-enunciating and I pronounce things.
Yeah.
In a way that I make sure that people know exactly what I'm talking about. Otherwise, it's what's called lazy tongue, and it's something that I have. So no, when I first went into radio, with no voice training, I trained myself. I thought, if I can't even understand what I'm listening to on the cassette, how can I expect the general audience to understand me? So it was through cringing and listening to myself over and over again and correcting what I heard that I was doing wrong. And I'll never, it's like a golfer that goes out on the golf course. A golfer will never walk off the golf course saying, I could not have done better than this game. There's no way. No golfer, but an entire game.
Oh.
They'd have to make 18 holes and 18 swings. That's the only way. There's no way you could do better than that. I've never walked out the air saying, I could not have done better than. No, I'm constantly going to be my own critic over this stuff like this. So does that answer your question a little bit about how I got involved? I knew I had to be a part of the industry from the moment I was in 3rd grade, and we were having this tour of this country radio station.
I was in Toastmasters for 6 years, and one of the hard things for me was to avoid using ums, ahs, those vocal pauses. And it took several years before I outgrew it. And so now it creeps back once in a while, but not very often.
I have crutches, constant crutches that I fall back on. And even if I'm nervous during an interview, I'll fall on a crutch and suddenly find myself using one word over and over and over and over again. Yeah. Also, listeners will correct me. When I first moved here, and I used to say Camp Canal. If chain and snow tire requirements on Highway 4 started at Camp Canal, I remember that one of the first phone calls I ever received, "It's Connell, you moron!" Well, every time that I see that chain and snow tire requirements are at Camp Connell, I always think of this guy from 15 years ago screaming at me, so I don't make that mistake. Actually, I get nervous over that, thinking, uh-oh, is it Connell or is it Connell? So
well, this TV program we're doing is cable TV, and it may be going to the home of the person. I know. He's still out there.
That called you a moron. I always think of him. Every time I see that, I think he's still listening to me this day, ready to call me and scream at me that it's Camp Connell.
Well, why were you attracted to News Talk Radio?
You can blame Mount St. Helens. I was in the 6th grade, giving away my age on this one, but I was in the 6th grade, 1980, May 18th, Mount St. Helens blew. Up until then, I was only interested in listening to music radio in elementary school. But once Mount St. Helens blew, I really discovered the AM dial and what other radio stations, how they were covering it, especially to be in that Seattle area. The local reporters that were going down to the scene, what they were covering, the destruction that was taking place because of the overflowing rivers and just the amount of destruction that Mount St. Helens gave to the state of Washington, Idaho, Montana, and beyond with the ash cloud. The local coverage was so completely different from the national coverage. I picked up on that immediately as to the in-depth reporting that we were receiving locally in regards to Mount St. Helens, and then the national news that would just say, the ash cloud is now over Italy. Well, okay, that doesn't mean anything, though, to those of us who live in Seattle and are worried and concerned about our neighbors on the other side of the state, that they were buried in ash in places like Spokane, Washington.
The next question is probably a hot button topic. What do you think of mainstream national news?
All right, well, are you playing gotcha? Mainstream national news is a lot of it is really interesting to listen to. You heard the mainstream national news just in regards to the Butte fire in Calaveras County. They never could quite identify where Calaveras is located. We were either just south of Sacramento, or we were the fire that was burning near Yosemite National Park. The Butte fire, Calaveras County, in national radio news, was a fire burning near Yosemite National Park. That's never how I've thought of Calaveras County. So when you ask me what I think of national news, they have a job to do, but they also have a job for a national audience. And as far as a national identification to a person who's listening in Fort Myers, Florida,
They know where Yosemite is.
they know where Yosemite National Park is.
Right.
But if you try to explain, well, it's where the town of San Andreas is, that's an earthquake zone, isn't it? It's very difficult. So I can understand to a national audience. The part that I'm probably bothered with national news the most is news that makes no sense to me, that I don't think deserves to be news. They'll say, last night, the winner of American Idol was this person, or guess who's going to be on Dancing with the Stars this upcoming fall. I don't care. But when that makes national news, I always try to figure out what angle are they coming at that they consider this to be national news. It used to be, 10 years ago, last night's winner of Survivor, or this person was kicked off Survivor, or when I hear anything about, the standard joke nowadays is the Kardashians. I don't ever care. That to me is not national news. It belongs in People magazine, but not a part of a national top of the hour news. But there is an audience for it, and it's well researched. And on a national perspective, they have room for that just as much as they do in regards to talking about a sports score of a significant sporting event. Like now, as you and I are talking, Major League Baseball playoffs are taking place. So of course that's going to be part of the top of the hour news because it's what's on the people's mind. We used to have a USA Today test where you'd take the front page of the USA Today when every radio station used to subscribe to USA Today. That's no longer the case with the internet. But we used to look at the front page of the USA Today, and if we didn't know what was on the front page of the USA Today of the typical 5 stories that they used to publish, then get to know that story, because that's what the nation is talking about. And I think that's what national news tries to do. It's probably what national news or what America is talking about if something happened during the MTV Video Music Awards that I could care less about. It doesn't mean anything to me what Britney Spears did the night before, but it is what people are talking about. By the time you get to that, to the water cooler conversation in the kitchen at work, somebody knows what Britney Spears did last night during the MTV Video Music Awards. So should I know? Probably, if I want to join in the conversation.
Well, I was thinking that I think that everything seems to be so entertaining. You know, it seems to be that the purpose is entertaining. But there's an ideological prism or a viewpoint in what they're doing. Do you think that the major news media has balance and fairness in its reporting in that regard?
I love your gotcha questions. I mean, this is really deep. News drives the direction of whatever it is that they want to drive.
It drives politics.
Yes. So when it comes to in the last presidential election, was it just Obama versus Romney, or was it Obama versus Romney versus Gary Johnson versus the Peace and Freedom Party candidate versus the Green Party candidate versus the Constitution Party candidate versus the Justice Party candidate, or was it just Romney versus Obama? As far as national news was concerned, it was Obama versus Romney. There were no other candidates in that race.
Right.
So if I know the complete picture, should I be upset that the national media only focuses on two people? Well,
if you were part of one of the smaller parties, you'd probably be upset.
of course you would. Gary Johnson should be upset. But the national media also has a measure for what the national public knows.
Right.
And for you and I could be upset over it. But that's kind of the general public. I think when you step outside the United States and you watch other news, the news is harsh outside of the United States.
Yeah.
There's a lot of murder. There's a lot of killing. There's a lot of stuff that scares us. Our news, as it stands now on a national scale, is soft. And I think we as Americans accept that sort of news. We don't want harsh reality out there for whatever reason.
Yeah, blood and guts may not be the best thing for young children to watch.
Not at this point. Not now, even though that is reality, though, Al.
Well, I'm thinking there's some really important things that are going on. And there's maybe major myths that are being continued. One of them, I think you may be aware of. Sometime back, Al Gore wrote a book, and I think it was called The Uncomfortable, something of the Uncomfortable Decision.
Okay.
It was also a videotape, and it was about global warming and how this is really a catastrophe, and it was a caused by Western civilization and the creation of CO2 in the atmosphere, and the CO2 was causing the global warming. Okay, it was all tied together, and they had charts showing the ice cores in Antarctica, proving the relationship between global warming and CO2, these levels of CO2. But the two charts, the two lines, were kept separate. When they were put closer together, there was an association, and it was consistent throughout history. Global warming preceded increases in CO2. Preceded. That means it didn't cause it. And that was the reason why those charts were kept separate, to show the association, but not the cause and effect. This, if a reporter, you can't sue a reporter, but it seemed like this is a massive fraud, and it should have been discovered by the media.
You're saying you're upset from inaccurate reporting.
Oh, mildly.
Okay.
But I'm even more upset as this.
Yeah, it always depends on who's doing the reporting, who they contribute to.
This is the whole media.
I
don't know any part.
Okay.
Well, maybe Fox News. That could be the exception. Well, right after 1990, the global warming stopped. It was flat. Well, it jigged, but there wasn't any increase. So this is tremendous good news. That means all this problem that we were concerned about, we don't have to do anything with carbon dioxide or anything else. We can really prosper. Our modern civilization is humming along good. And what good news. But they didn't report that. They said that the problem is climate change. They ignored the global warming because it wasn't there. Then they continued to say that global warming was continuing. Presently, they're trying to change the old readings of the atmosphere and the surface stations and the sea to show that maybe it was colder then and now it's really warmer, and so global warming is therefore continuing. It's so phony that the global warming skeptics are so right that it would seem like what a media event this would be.
I can tell you're upset by this.
Oh, look at the billions of dollars.
Yes. It's what created the gigantic cliffs in Yosemite National Park? Ice.
Yes.
Well, when the ice melted, was man around? Did man cause that ice to melt at that point?
So,
right now, glaciers are growing on Mount Shasta.
Yeah.
There is consistent and constant climate change. The part that becomes the political football, of course, and the part that you're upset by is man contributing to this climate change, and what significance is man contributing to climate change. And then you're upset that you feel mainstream media is contributing to saying change human behavior because we are affecting climate change. I understand.
Well, close to that.
I hear that.
I think there's an ideological agenda, and it needs to have a problem. It needs to have a crisis. Without a crisis, you cannot advance the agenda. The agenda is basically expansion of government, not just in our country, but worldwide. The creation of a new world order.
Okay.
And this is bad news. And it doesn't have to continue if only the truth were known. And this is what I feel that if we are going to have a better future, it'll be with the major media going back to honest reporting.
All right, Al. I don't know how often you hear a top of the hour radio news that they focus for a full 2 minutes or 3 minutes or 4 minutes or 5 minutes on climate change. I'm not sure. I have no idea. But take any day of the week and listen to a top of the hour radio news, and then please let me know if you hear this, that they're pushing a climate change agenda. I think what will typically happen is what's often cited as a mainstream news source would be something like the New York Times or Time Magazine or Newsweek magazine. And if that's the case, and if that's the only thing that you're focusing on and saying, well, that's what mainstream media is reporting, they probably have an agenda. They probably have a drive or a certain...
A purpose.
A purpose.
Yeah.
But there's plenty of other media out there. And so it's just like when I hear... which I do often, and a lot of people will say, well, did you read that ridiculous article in the Washington Post? If it upsets you, don't read the Washington Post.
Right.
I can tell you're upset. You're very passionate about this. There's a lot of alternative media right now.
Yeah, and the internet is where most of it lies.
Yeah, that's correct.
And there is good news. And there's a lot of good
look
news.
at the magazine stands right now. You'll find every political spectrum imaginable.
Yeah, that's true. And so it's not all doom and gloom. But it is a slight problem that probably needs to be taken care of.
I agree. But don't get upset over an article in the New York Times and continue to cite the New York Times. Just drop the New York Times and you'll drop your anger.
Now, allowing my anger to subside, we'll move to local news.
Yes.
What's your thoughts on local news?
Local news is exactly why I run AM 1450 KVML. I'm the program director of KVML, and that's the purpose, is to serve the community, and we do so by announcing the community events that are taking place, serving the public, and of course broadcasting the local news. I have a tremendous news team right now. Our news staff is made up of 4 people and myself, so actually 5 people, but BJ Hansen is our news director. We also have Tracy Peterson on the air, and Tori James is helping us in the news department. Sabrina Beal, who's also responsible for mymotherlode.com, and then myself, and I help contribute. The news department is tremendous, and we cover, of course, all of Tuolumne County, and we cover Calaveras County. As far as the reach of AM 1450, we've reached what we call the Highway 4 corridor from Copperopolis all the way up to Arnold. But then I also I've had people in Dorrington tell me they can pick me up really?
Depends on the clouds.
Boy, they really they really want to listen, which is fantastic. But we really do cover the Highway 4 corridor, so Murphy's and Angels Camp and Arnold. Once you go north of Highway 4, it becomes difficult to pick up AM 1450. But it doesn't mean we ignore the rest of Calaveras County. If you listen to my road reports, I'm constantly talking about the cows that are loose on Pool Station Road. I talk about...
How do you get that information?
I do. Thanks to the California Highway Patrol. They let us know immediately. So whether it's a disabled vehicle or a significant traffic collision of some kind, even if I know that the station can't be picked up in Valley Springs, we have to deliver that information because there may be a person driving from Angels Camp,
right.
And if their job is in Lodi, for example, they're going to go through Valley Springs. Now, if there's an unfortunate traffic accident and the road is blocked, they're going to want to know that before they ever start heading up towards San Andreas. So perhaps they'd take Highway 4 as an alternate route. But that's why we cover those traffic accidents, and we'll cover all of Calaveras County. Even though we can't be heard in Burson and Wallace or West Point, we'll still cover those parts of Calaveras.
If a driver came across something and wanted to call you, let you know to go on the air, like a traffic accident?
Call 911. Call the California Highway Patrol. Because the California Highway Patrol is a source that we'll trust.
Okay.
And we can deliver that trusted information. Unfortunately, and we see this a lot with social media, there's a lot of disinformation that's suddenly put out there, and then everybody else will believe it.
Like global
warming. They'll
start...
You're upset. But they'll start reporting on it as though it's fact. And then everyone is confused 24 hours later when they find out that that simply was never the case.
Right.
But it was usually nowadays it's social media is where I see a lot of disinformation coming from. So if you see something on the road and it is a significant traffic hazard, call 911 because the California Highway Patrol will then be able to report it.
Okay, well, that's good to know. I didn't know that. I thought I'd have to call KVML. Now, what does the program director do?
Program director protects the station license. We are licensed to serve the public, and when the FCC comes back and says it's time to renew your license, have you been serving the public? We have to prove to the Federal Communications Commission that we have been serving the public for which we have been given a radio license. So how does KVML prove that we're serving the public? We can showcase our local newscasts. We can showcase some of the people that we've been talking with in the community, the relationships that we've formed, but the FCC wants to see things on paper. So through public service announcements and community events, we're able to showcase that we are serving the public. When we become involved with drives during Christmas, coat drives, or donating blood and asking people to stop by and donate some blood, the reason that you hear a lot of radio stations doing events like this is because that's part of keeping that license of serving the public for which we are licensed for to serve that public. Again, the FCC will come by every radio station and say, how did you serve the public for which your radio station license is granted for? When I first started in Radio Al, each person that was on the air had to have an FCC license just to talk into a microphone. That's no longer the case. We no longer need licenses to talk on a microphone, but we still have to make sure that we are going to retain that license that the FCC has granted us.
With 1 minute left, what competition do you face?
In today's world, everything. But let me tell you how we keep our audience local, 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 local. With that local news and that local community information, there's no other place in the world of radio that Calaveras is going to be able to grab that local information.
Thank you for joining us.
That was a fast half hour, Al.
Thank you for watching our Taxpayer Alert program. See you next time.